Our first speaker for the evening. Graeme is a multi-disciplinary game developer and longtime jam enthusiast. He builds playful VR experiences as the gameplay director for Owlchemy Labs, and as an independent developer, he's assembled dozens of small titles in varying genres and styles. He loves using games as a way to create and explore new worlds, and he's standing right behind me, isn't he? I'm sorry. All right, everybody welcome Graeme. So you can just use the arrow keys, and then this, your microphone, you can put it on if you want, or just hold it.
Okay, I'm just gonna hold it. Okay, hey everybody. All right, yeah, I will get started. So yeah, one of the reasons I love game jams is because I just enjoy learning how to build things quickly and more effectively. Because building games is complicated. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and a really common piece of advice that people give and receive all the time is to just keep it simple, limit the scope of your game. Going to do that, it's still not easy to actually do it. Because it's fun to be ambitious. It's fun to give ourselves more to do than we can possibly hope to achieve in a weekend. And it's fun to just dream big and try to make something incredible. But we're kind of being unfair with ourselves when we do that, because it's all too easy to get overambitious and basically set ourselves up to fail, which can be fun, but it's not really being fair to ourselves. So all I want to do for the next 10 minutes or so is just look at development in a slightly different way and try to open up our minds a bit to think about how we can try to be more fair to ourselves throughout the development process. So for the sake of this talk, let's say that when we're building a game, what's really happening is that our imaginary friend here is building a castle for us. And this isn't just anybody. This is a real fake imaginary friend. His name is Simon. His legal name is Simon Scopewell. And he is a living being that's going to have to build this thing for us. So the castle that we decide we're going to make has to be built up brick by brick, and Simon's the one who's going to do it. So it's kind of easy to make problems for ourselves, but let's try to go easy on Simon because he's a good guy. He just likes building castles. We don't want to make life too difficult for him for no reason. So let's figure out how we can kind of treat him fairly. Games and castles start out as nothing. Every time we add an idea or a feature or a bit of code to our game, that's some big heavy piece of stone that poor Simon has to go find. He has to pick it up. He has to carry it over to the build site. It takes time and it takes effort. And there's only so much time and effort available to go around in a weekend. So if Simon spends all of Saturday running back and forth with heavy bricks, not only is he going to be exhausted, but we're going to end up with a foundation of something that he just can't finish on Sunday. So kind of the first thing we need to do is make sure that we're not asking Simon to move more than he needs to. If you've seen a cool castle before, you've seen pictures of something before, and you say, oh, I want to make something just like that, stop and think about all the parts that went into it. All the ornate and sort of nice flourishy bits that you see on the surface, they have to be held up by something, right? They have to be supported by huge amounts of massive stones underneath. So just imagine poor Simon picking up each one of those stones and moving them into place one by one. And just think, was it worth it? Is each element in your game that you can see worth the cost of all the supporting elements that it requires? But okay, what if you really want to build something just like the big fantasy Cinderella castle that you have in your mind? You need to figure out a way to capture what you love about it using fewer pieces. So you ask yourself, which parts are important? Which can you let go of? What is it about this thing that appeals to you? Is it the general shape of it or one of the details? And kind of understanding why you like a more complicated reference is the key to being able to actually use it instead of just getting tripped up by it. So think about how you'd explain it to Simon. If while the two of you are kind of planning this build, what do you bring up in that conversation? How would you help him understand why you want it to be built that way? How can you justify this stuff? Justify the things that you're asking for? When you talk about your favorite games, listen to yourself and think about what do you mention first? Which things are really important to communicate and which things do you leave till later? If you do try to copy something huge and complicated and you're missing any of the key pieces, it's probably just going to fall apart. More complication means more things that can go wrong. And Simon is only one person, so we're asking him to dig and lift and carry and do all this stuff all weekend. He's not going to have much time for OSHA standards and quality testing or even proper plans, most likely. So let's not ask him to do something that requires exact measurements or for him to get up on a rickety ladder. We're in a hurry, we need something sturdy, so let's just focus on that. You want players to focus on what your game is, not what's missing from it. So don't build in a way that a missing piece is going to compromise the whole thing. Make something that stands up on its own no matter what. Even if your castle is basically a cube, it can still protect you. You can still hide behind it. It can still host visitors. You can still climb on top and enjoy a beautiful view. It's worthwhile no matter how simple it is. But no, that's boring, you say. I have a super unique idea for something unlike any other castle that's ever been made before. So you tell Simon about it, and of course he has no experience building anything like that. Your castle is going to be one of a kind, yeah, everybody's going to be really impressed, but poor Simon is going to have to carve out all these completely bespoke pieces. He might even need some new tools to do it that he's going to have to develop, and that takes time. So after he's done with this centerpiece, is he going to have time to stack up everything else around it? Both of these castles center on a big complicated centerpiece. The orange one relies on numerous other pieces propping it up, otherwise it just wouldn't stand at all and it wouldn't work. But the green one is a weird shape too. It's just that it stands on its own and it's complemented by the pieces that have been added to it. So if you're asking Simon to make something really unique and special, you should probably talk about that up front so he can plan for it. You should make sure he has time to carve it out and build the rest of the structure. It's probably going to be easiest if you make that weird thing your foundation, start with that, and then you might have time to stack up some other stuff on top of it, but that should always be done to complement what you're already making as your unique base. Don't make it so that your custom part is completely dependent on other things that you might not have time for. If your goal really is just to make something that looks unique, remember that uniqueness doesn't always just come from the structure. If you leave Simon some time to take breaks, he's going to be able to wander around the grounds and find ways to decorate the thing. Put up some banners, give them a special design, plant some seeds in the garden, right? This is not what we think of as building a castle, but it can make it look different than the one next door. Put up some lighting to throw cool shadows and turn that basic shape into something that reads as more complicated than it is. Compared to lugging bricks and stones around, decorations are a lot easier for Simon to adjust and find the right positioning. And this means it's safer to leave this kind of stuff until the very end, right? You don't want to put up banners and then realize you've misplaced a wall and you have to take everything down, change the wall, and put it back up again. So you save that polish for once the structure is set and once you can be confident that it's going to complement the thing that you have underneath. You can change a lot about how your castle is perceived by how you choose to decorate, what you choose to prioritize. And even beyond the design of it, the places that Simon spends more time on will show. But a castle is more than just rocks and decorations. It's kind of art that does something, right? It serves a function. Maybe it's for defense, maybe it's to host visitors. Depending on the purpose, even a simple design can serve perfectly well. So the purpose of your castle is the strongest determination of how it's going to be remembered. If you have purpose in mind from the beginning, all of your conversations with Simon throughout are going to be influenced by that idea, even if it's subconsciously, and your project is going to have a sense of consistency. So know what your game is about. It can be really simple, but you need to decide, you need to be clear, and you need to stick with that throughout. If this was a castle hundreds of years from now when it's a ruin, what are people going to think about it, right? Are they going to think, oh, that castle was so ambitious that even though it was never finished, I'm impressed by the idea of it. I love hearing the story because its construction was so inspiring. Or, oh, this thing was so well built, they just don't make them like this anymore. The craftsmanship is incredible even though it's simple. Or, oh, this castle was so unique, and even just from the parts that are left, you can tell the builder had a vision unlike any other, and it's really different from things from that time. Do any of those memories appeal to you? What do you want people to remember after they've played your game? Obviously not hundreds of years from now, but next week, tomorrow, what do you want them to be left with? Is it a feeling or a certain experience, a memory of a certain moment that happened? And then from there, what's the best use of Simon's time in order to make that happen? So we have a lot to ask of this little guy over the course of the weekend. So I implore you just to be nice to him. Regardless of how capable, ambitious, and flawless you are, think about whether Simon can handle it. Maybe you don't care, but remember that'll also be part of the story of your castle. Years from now, when people look back at those ruins, are they going to say oh yeah, it's beautiful, but don't look up the story behind it. It's pretty tragic. Poor Simon Scopewell hurt his back building that thing, and he was never the same. That's probably not what you want people to remember, right? So for the extra life jam, we're thinking about compassion as well as creativity. So even though Simon is made up, Let's try to be good to him, try to understand the difficulties he faces, and work with him, not against him. You can even talk to him in your mind is okay. Each time you're going to add or change something about your game, imagine you actually have to tell Simon about it, and think about whether you feel guilty about asking him to do so much, right? How can you ask things of him fairly? What do you think he'd say? Is what you're proposing going to be effective and actually be a good use of time and energy? And be open to suggestions. You might have options that change your castle a little bit, but they make Simon's life way easier in exchange. And that kind of trade-off is an important part of collaboration with anybody. Your castle is never going to look exactly the way it does in your head, but the one that Simon builds is going to be real, and it's going to be driven by that same purpose. So be passionate about the purpose, not the blueprint, and trust your friends, real or imaginary, to help you in that pursuit. Yeah, so let's do our best to kind of be fair to each other and to ourselves, and we can all build something special. Thanks for listening.